First of all, a very quick question. Today, when we talk about partnerships, there's always been seen, people have always spoken about the blame game, who's not bringing what on the table and who is competing with the other. And of course, we know that, fintechs and the banking sectors, they have something to bring on the table as well. And I'll start with you, Ricardo. Where do you see the gaps being in forming reasonable partnerships that are mutually beneficial for both partners?
Yeah, thank you for the question. You see, I think the banks and fintechs have come a long way. This has been like 5 years ago, just to have a short intro on that. I remember when I was in Poland, and at that time I was on the banking side, so I have both experiences coming from the bank side as CEO of one of the digital banks, and now in the fintech area. At that time, I remember a company that was doing payments on behalf of customers using screen scrapping technologies, etc. And what they did is they entered the market, they started abusing that process, and then even the case went to court and won, etc. When banks and fintechs were kind of competing with each other, right? Then you fast forward just about 5 years, and this is really short period. And just recently, while I was still CEO of the digital bank in Portugal, we did a partnership with TransferWise, now Wise, in which we embed the services into the banking app. And this was something completely impossible years ago. So I think there's been a huge evolution in terms of how banks and fintechs have evolved. And what in fact they have done is to close those gaps. So instead of coming in with my formula for how I'm going to succeed, I'm just bringing in what can I contribute? What is my value added to this process? So there's a lot to be said there in terms of what type of value added is important for the banks and for the fintechs. But in fact, the big evolution that happened is that now both parties understand that it's a positive thing for them to cooperate, and they have to bring value to both, right? Not to compete against each other.
Right. That statement reminds me of one that I had some time ago, where you're told, don't ask what the government or the country can do for you. Ask yourself, what can you do for your country? And I want to welcome Kenneth. Thank you so much for making time with us right here on this conversation. Kenneth is the head of innovation and partnerships, Global Transaction Bank, TBA Group in Nigeria. Before I come to you, Kenneth, let me go to Akshay. Actually, I want to hear your own definition of the current state of affairs when it comes to fintechs and banks collaboration. How would you define the current state of affairs? Would you say that all is well from your own experience with creating or trying to create these synergies or these partnerships? What would you report to us?
I mean, I think the important thing here, firstly, is that you see, fintech, the evolution on fintech is relatively new, and so you have to, I think, excuse all the parties, if I can use that word, right, of trying to figure out who is exactly playing in what space. And I think it's possible, what Ricardo was alluding to earlier, where one party has a very strong view that this is my competition for my customer and not somebody I want to partner with. But I think at the end of the day, I feel that stakeholders are realizing that the value lies in solving the customer's problem.
Correct.
Are you solving the customer's problem? Are you making financial transactions more frictionless? Is the broad question which everyone around the table needs to answer. And this is one of the reasons why some of the mobile money operators on the continent have succeeded. Nigeria is a bit of an exception in that regard because of regulation and all of that.
Yeah.
But if you look at most of East Africa, most of Sub-Saharan Africa, you would find that mobile operators have provided a solution that is relatively less friction. And therefore, they have succeeded in capturing a very big part of the value ecosystem. When you look at Asia Pacific, India, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, you find that telcos have not done that. And it is actually the banks plus the fintechs that have actually captured that market space. So the question which I think which is very relevant to ask all of ourselves is that if we partner better, I have a sense that both fintechs and banks can capture a very significant part of the value ecosystem and provide some of our friendly telcos good competition in being able to manage the payment ecosystem.
Right, right. And that particular last statement is what brings us to Kenneth. What for you would be better partnership? You know, what would you expect if someone from a fintech solution company was to approach you in your office to request for partnerships? What would you be looking for in ensuring that this partnership is better?
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody, again. There are a number of things that one will look at, and I want to start by looking at the options that we have on the table as banks, for example. Whether there's really any choice between maintaining the status quo or partnering with fintechs to make progress. The truth is, as banks, we have seen or realized that we don't really have any choice. Am I audible? It's like there's an echo.
You're audible, but would appreciate if you can put back on your video, because this will be shared later on across audio-visual channels. Yes.
All right, great. So it's not a question of choice for banks now. It's a question of survival, if you ask me. And I work for UBA across about 20 jurisdictions, 20 countries in Africa, and I can speak directly to this. So we don't have a choice but to partner with fintechs. But what I will see as successful partnership, we will want to deliver value for my customers. Banks have basic constraints. Regulation, you have legacy infrastructure, you have data silos, you have skill. This is common knowledge now, for instance, to us who are in the banks, that you may not have all these skill sets in the room. So you have to go out there to go and get these skills. And then products are being rolled out by fintechs at the speed of light, which are competing directly with bank products. So for me, what will represent a successful partnership will be, first of all, what will give value to my customers in terms of their user experience and other values. Then secondly is we look at revenue, for example, what will give me the best value in terms of revenue, and then cost of fulfillment, for instance. So those are the values I would like to capture, but most importantly is how is the consumer feeling, consuming that service at that point in time. At what price points am I delivering to the customer? And at the end of the day, am I creating value for myself and the fintech that I've partnered? There are a number of other considerations we can bring to the table, but the important thing is the customer first. Is the customer satisfied with the service he's getting from the partnership I've gone into with a particular fintech? Right.
I'm happy that the conversations that we've been having from morning today are customer-centered, and everyone is saying solutions to the customer first before anything else. Ricardo, I want to hear from you on this. We've had from one of the previous sessions that big tech players are now jumping into the foray of offering financial solutions. Should the bank or the banking sector be worried? Should they be worried about this? We've had Kenneth say that it's now a question of survival. We have no choice. We have to partner with them. Should the banking sector be worried? We see big tech companies now jumping into the field of offering financial solutions that ordinary banks have been doing.
Well, now putting on my hat as a CEO of a particular bank, right? So when I was the CEO of the bank, I used to worry a lot about that point, right? So you have very big companies like Apple Pay coming in, or Google Pays, and etc. Now, what has happened is that they have mostly chosen to partner with a particular bank on one side. Second, they mandate, so they have a very strong position, like you saw when they rolled out Apple Pay, especially. So there are very clear positions that banks have to comply with. Most of them are not in favor of banking sector itself, but they do the leveraging with their position. And most importantly, what they're focused on is to move the customer from the bank into their environment, into their ecosystem, right? Even if this might not be in the total interest of the customer. So I think that yes, we have to worry because they are very big. But on the other hand, I think the way they're doing it, they will evolve in the way that smaller fintechs have evolved. They will see that in the future, it's not the best way just to force your position like in the past banks did, right? Banks forced their position in terms of fintechs, and then they understood that there was a partnership to be done and there was a win-win situation there. I think the big tech companies are doing the same path, and they will learn that maybe it's not the best way just to force their position in terms of it. So I see, as a CEO, I was much more interested in partnering with smaller fintechs, where there we had already gone that path of understanding each other. We were in a much more mature position of understanding, and so the partnerships were much more fruitful than just making a partnership with a big tech. So I would, some of them like Apple and others, you'll have to do it because otherwise you're out of the market. So that's the force they have, but it's so much more important with the smaller ones.
Right. Very interesting. Actually, I'm sure there was a presentation a while ago where I had a very distressful, fintech solution provider who said, most of the times you want to partner with these banks, but you go into a boardroom meeting with the CEO or whoever has been assigned to handle you, but they get nothing. They don't understand these things, and in the end you leave the boardroom very frustrated because you had a solution, but they did not even see it. Actually, I would like you to share with us what are the other frustrations so that the CEOs watching you right now can be able to ensure that whenever a fintech provider is visiting, they are able to look out for those red flags, and in the end a partnership is formed from those conversations that you have.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a very, very important point because this is what I would really recommend fintechs to do, right? Because when I get a fintech, when I was in the bank, and this is what I'm doing now as a fintech, right? So I'm doing that part now with the other hat of a fintech. But when I was as a CEO, the one thing that was a killer was when the fintech just came in and said, look, this is what I'm doing, right? This is the area I started, and you can see that they started disrupting banking first. That was the initial model. And now, because it hasn't gone so successful, now I'd like to partner with you. But this is a weak position, right? And this, unfortunately, is the majority of the fintechs get into this conversation. What they have to do is two things, right? They have to, first of all, they have to prepare well in terms of understanding how am I going to bring value to this meeting? How am I going to bring value to this particular bank? Right, in terms of the technology, because I'm more advanced in a particular technology, because I have experience in something, and don't underestimate the part of the regulator. Banks have a huge difficulty with regulation right now. They're under a huge amount of pressure, whilst fintechs have it a little bit easier. They can work with the regulators, and I've for example, partnered with the company just because they were able to start contacting the regulator. The regulators have some sandboxes, which they help the fintechs start navigating the process and testing with the regulator. And I had much more difficulty with the regulator than the fintech. And suddenly I saw, wow, this is great to partner with these guys because they're already more advanced in terms of getting the regulator on board this process, right? So do your homework first, understand how your technology and build on your technology that you're going to bring value. And this is a much stronger position when you come to the table as opposed of just saying, look, this is what I did in the past. This was mainly how I tried to disrupt you, but it didn't work out. So how can now partner and I can access your customer base? This is a weak position, right? So I would really recommend the other way.
Okay. Akshay, same question. What would you say after hearing what Ricardo said?
Yeah, I mean, look, the fact of the matter is, when you're trying to disrupt any business, right, you got to have what I call, you got to be a little thick-skinned, and you also have got to have nerves of steel. So you can't give up with one bank saying this doesn't work. I think we've tried a whole bunch of things. You know, my first learning has been never go to the top 3 banks when you want to launch a product. Don't waste your time. Go to the guys who are the underdogs in the banking market first, right? Talk to, it's okay. You will not get the same size of customer base, but they are more hungry for business. They are more hungry to attack the market. So go to the mid-sized banks. Don't go to the largest bank in that country to partner with him, because chances are he's still sitting on a high horse. And when he starts seeing your partnership resulting in deposits moving away from his bank to the smaller banks, he will realize the strength of your product, and that is the time to have the conversation with them, right? So I think it's a little bit about strategy. It's a little bit about tactics. You know, saying I got frustrated in a board meeting. I mean, that's just life, my friend, is what I would say to any fintech. You know, you want to do something disruptive, you want to create $1 billion of value, nothing comes for free, right? So you got to go through the pain. And the pain is about, partly about striking multiple conversations with multiple partners, but also partly having the right tactics on how to navigate that market.
Right. Kenneth, that should be very interesting for you. See what you've made people like Akshay to do. You know, they feel you're still sitting on a high horse. I'm saying this because I believe the bank you are.
Kenneth, no personal offense intended. You know, so you're doing the wrong thing here, Anangwe. You know, you're making us fight.
Let me. So
Anyway,
you need them to start to approach it from that perspective. I want to read your mind. Why or what makes big banks, you know, to be in that position where they are seen as sitting on a high horse and not receptive to partnerships, to a point where the fintechs have to go through the underdogs in the industry for you to recognize them, when these partnerships would have been even fruitful if you accepted them in the first place?
yes, I think, and I understand clearly. It's also a truth that the big banks could pose a bit of a problem. And the first reason, one of the major reasons why banks need to partner fintechs is essentially maybe around the sort of speed to market in terms of product delivery. Now, most big banks, for example, procurement could take as long as 3 years. And basically, you cannot avoid that. And it has to do with the risk appetite of big banks. It also has to do with their experience. They have very solid structures in place that the way they feel that things should happen, basically.
Yeah. It
could be frustrating for a fintech. Now, if you're a fintech, for instance, and you're bringing a card product or partnership into a bank, big banks naturally ask you for maybe PCI DSS certification, very big. And most big banks will ask you essentially to give them maybe ISO 27001 certification for security, risk management, and all that.
Yeah.
Smaller banks will not do that. So my take here, and which is what I do most of the time, is actually to standardize the process. That's my core function. Standardize the process, make sure that the fintech engagement is less torturous as it is, and look at those basic steps as big banks that we can cut off and make that handshake quick and fast, so that we can also, to a certain extent, meet the speed aspirations of the fintech as far as the partnership is concerned. So is the truth. The risk appetite is different for big banks when you compare it to the smaller banks. Smaller banks are hungrier, they can take more risks. Probably they've not been burnt as much as the big banks have been burnt over the years. And it's a balance. But naturally, what I think and what I suggest for every big bank is to actually streamline the processes and take away non-value adding steps that will actually prolong the process of integration, probably, and then go to market on the whole. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to hear that. There's need to actually reduce on the red tape and bureaucracy when it comes to creating an environment for possible partnerships. I want to ask all of you now for your closing remarks, and the question that I would like you to anchor your closing remarks on would also be on the aspect of bridging the cultural gaps. We've seen fintechs being seen as innovative, they're new thinking, while the traditional banks have been seen to want to stick to their traditional ways of doing things. What would be the future of banks and fintechs partnerships? That's what I want you to capture while giving us your closing remarks. I'll start with you, Ricardo.
Yeah, sure. The point here, like I mentioned before, is fintechs have to come in with a specialization more, right? And that just the business model they had before, in which they were disrupting the bank. So they have to specialize more, right? They have to specialize more so that they bring this to the table. The process within the banks is complicated, and sometimes even getting more complicated with the regulator becoming stronger and stronger. So that part is going to be there always. But I think that if the fintechs show how they can solve a particular problem, part of the equation well, this is always there is this decision that banks have with it. That means that they're going to develop the solution within the bank, or they're going to outsource it and partner with somebody else. Many times the banks have the decision. Now, if the fintech comes in and shows that I have already done work on this part, I'm a specialist in this particular technology or this part of the equation, etc., and I can contribute to that, that helps a lot in terms of making decisions. So that's on one side. The other side is that fintechs can also evolve to be more proactive instead of just waiting for the banks to approach them or for the banks to give them an opportunity. This is a kind of a new model in which fintechs are moving in when they are doing partnership with other fintechs as well. So this is a fintech as a service almost. So they join with another fintechs. Just to give you an example, in our process now with the fintech that I'm in, this is software for credit processes. We do, for example, partnership with another company, with another fintech that is doing the identification of people. So the identification of the identity cards and all that process. Now, when a bank interacts with us, they will have access through APIs, etc., to the services of the other fintech as well. So one approach that I would really recommend fintechs is start to get together, create a kind of a network of fintechs, and in this way you can present much stronger when you approach banks. And then the process, as I mentioned before, the last point is work with the regulators. Because if you can work on those sandboxes that regulators have, this will break immediately all that type of red tape and those those cultural aspects, because they have already started the process with the regulator, and so this gives a head start in terms of all those people, the compliance, the legal guys, and the bank that always give you the no, right? So these are a couple of the suggestions that I would give fintechs to start moving in a more proactive way.
Amazing. I'm told the next presenter is already online. So maybe Kenneth in 30 seconds and Akshay in another 30 seconds, just your closing remarks, and then we'll be able to close the session.
So I was saying that banks are interested in customer experience and of course revenue potential of any partnership. So just like the previous speaker, Akshay said, the most important thing is to be able to put value on the table. Again, banks must realize that we're drifting towards a much more open system, open finance, open data systems that will allow us to integrate or partner with fintechs in a much more seamless manner, and then be able to commoditize those relationships to make sure that it provides value for everybody on the table. I will expect more standardization, and also banks will naturally focus on what they are good at, and then naturally, of course, partner with fintechs in areas where they don't think that they have a lot of expertise, so to speak, because you don't have unlimited amount of dollars on the table going into these projects as the case may be. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Akshay.
My advice to the boards of all the large banks would be to create digital transformation at the centerpiece of their strategy, to make one or more senior executives in their leadership team have a P&L responsibility, a profit and loss responsibility for what I would call digital revenues. Begin to classify digital revenues. And by the way, some banks are already doing this. Begin to classify digital revenues separately so you can track what initiatives are being taken under digitization, and fintechs would fall under that, right? Is my advice to banks. My advice to fintechs and to upcoming fintechs is learn to understand who you need to partner with. You know, everything will not work with the snap of a button. Don't expect other organizations to have the same DNA that your organization has. So be patient, learn to understand dynamics, play those dynamics, and do the right thing for both your business and your partner's business.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. And on that note, understand who to partner with. I want to believe that in this particular case, we can all partner with each other. And more so, Ricardo has two hats, of course, from the bank perspective and fintech perspective. I'm pretty sure that there's a lot more that you can pick from him. And I want to echo what Marco Sausa says on the chat box. He says, hello, everyone. Do you want to see how to apply for a personal loan by our app? Join us at the ITSCREDIT booth to see our omni-channel digital platform solution. And this is to welcome everyone who's watching us right now, that you can visit the Currency Cloud and ITSCREDIT booths in the expo area, which is on the left side of your screen. Also remember that you can also network. There is a very important tab right there for networking. If there's anyone you had give some very nice presentations or submissions and you want to know more about them, feel free to network. I'm also happy to see someone who would like to network with me. We'll be able to interact and engage more on this. So I want us to move to the next session, as we also thank ITSCloud. Ricardo, thank you very much for sitting and agreeing to sponsor this session. We want to say thank you to your team, and we will network even more in the course of this event. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time. Thank you.